Hey guys, welcome. Assalamu alaikum. In our lesson today, we are going to discuss the mock examination paper, biology paper 1 of course, of Maranda High School year 2022. Let us start with our first question. Name the organelle that performs each of the following functions in a cell. Roman number 1, protein synthesis. Okay, so this is the ribosome. Roman number 2, transport of cell secretions. This, of course, is the Golgi apparatus. Question number 2, part A. Define the term parthenocopy. Now, parthenocopy is a condition whereby you are going to end up having the formation of a fruit without fertilization happening. Now, when we talk about fertilization, we know that it's the fusion of the male and female gametes, right? And this also occurs in plants. So fertilization leads to the formation of a seed, which in most cases is going to be covered by the fruit wall, okay, what we call the fruit. In parthenocopy, you're going to have some plants like bananas, whereby fertilization does not happen, yet we end up having a fruit. So in this case, fruit formation is usually controlled by. Okay, part B. Name 2 plant growth hormones that promote parthenocopy. We are talking about auxins, and of course another group of hormones is the gibberellins. Number 3. The diagram below shows a longitudinal section of mammalian skin. Okay, let's take a minute and observe the diagram. If you need more time, just pause the video and take however much time you need. Part A. Name the parts labeled F and G. Okay, before we do that, let's just briefly remind ourselves of the basic structure of the skin. So the skin is divided into 2 main layers. The upper layer is known as the epidermis. The lower layer is known as the dermis. Now the epidermis is further divided into 3 layers. The uppermost layer is known as the conified layer, okay? And that is what we have here, represented as F. The middle layer is known as the granular layer, okay? Now, if you look at that part, you can clearly see that there are small dots, right? So the cells that make up the granular layer are made up of these tiny particles, these granules, and that is the reason why they are referred to as the granular layer. So that is represented, okay, actually it's not labeled. So moving on to the innermost layer of the epidermis, and that is the Malpighian layer. That is represented by G. So in this layer, we are going to have specialized cells known as melanocytes. Melanocytes produce melanin. This is our pigment. Now, melanin is a pigment that is present in our skin, in our eyes, and even in our hair. It gives us color in these parts of the body. So melanin also serves a very crucial role in that it protects our body from the harmful effects of the ultraviolet rays of the sun. Okay, I believe we have answered part A. Part B. State 1 function of each of the parts labeled H and J. Okay, so part H and J make up the dermis. Remember, the dermis is, the second layer of the skin, the one that is found beneath the epidermis. Actually, most of the parts of the skin are found within the dermis. This is where you're going to have the hair, you're going to have muscles, you're going to have the layers of fat, you're going to have nerve endings, the network of blood capillaries, you're going to have the erector pili muscles, okay, sebaceous glands, the subcutaneous fat. All of these are going to be present within the dermis. Okay, so let's look at H. H is clearly connected to the hair shaft, okay? So that is the hair shaft and that is H. H is a muscle. Specifically, it's called the erector pili muscle. So what muscles usually do is that they are able to contract and relax. So when the erector pili muscle contracts, because it's linked to the hair shaft, it can change the angle of the hair. either causing it to stand erect or lie flat on the skin. Okay, so when the erector pili muscle contracts, the hair shaft stands upright. And when it does so, it traps a layer of air, okay? Air is a poor conductor of heat. So this reduces the amount of heat that we lose. This occurs, of course, when temperatures are low and it's cold. Now, when it's the reverse, okay, when temperatures are warm or maybe just normal, the erector pili muscle relaxes. And when it does so, it causes the hair muscle also to lie flat. And when it does so, it also causes the hair to lie flat on the surface of our skin. So very little air is trapped. This encourages maximum loss of heat to the surrounding. Haya, tunaendelea. J. So J, that is the subcutaneous fat, layer of fat. This is also known as the adipose tissue. It's used for storage of fats. And of course, this layer of fat acts as an insulator against heat loss. So it reduces the amount of heat that we lose to our surroundings. So mammals have a layer of fat underneath their skin. And this is good because it helps us in thermoregulation. We need to maintain a constant body temperature, and that requires a lot of work. It also needs from us not to lose heat excessively to the surrounding. So having that layer of fat acts as an insulator. Now, just a point of note, air as well as fat are both poor conductors of heat. Anything that is a poor conductor of heat becomes a good insulator, okay? It reduces heat loss to the surrounding. Moving on to question number 4, part A. State 2 characteristics that are used to divide the phylum Arthropoda into classes. So when you talk about phylum Arthropoda, these are the invertebrates, okay? And they are divided into 5 main classes. You have Crustacea, Arachnida, Insecta, Chilopoda, and Diplopoda. So the question is that if you have arthropods, how are you able to determine which class that an arthropod belongs to based on the following characteristics? Number 1, the number of body parts. How many body parts do they have? Is it 2, 3, and so on? Number of legs. Do they have 2 pairs of legs? Or is it maybe 3 pairs of legs? Or is it between 5 to 10 pairs of legs, like in the crustaceans? Higher. Next one, the presence and number of antennae. So these are 2 things. Number 1, the presence of antennae, okay? Do they have antenna, okay? If they do, then how many pairs do they have? Do they have 1 pair like in insects, or do they have 2 pairs like in crustaceans? Now, one class of arthropods lacks antennae, okay? And that, of course, is the arachnids. So if you get a question and it's telling you that a certain animal was discovered, blah, 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 and, you're given a characteristic whereby it has an exoskeleton, making it an arthropod, but it lacks antennae, that makes it automatically to belong to which class? Arachnida, the spiders and mites, okay? Part B, name the class with the largest number of individuals in the phylum Arthropoda, okay? So the class that is the most successful one in populating the earth is the Insecta, okay? Where we have insects. Insects are the largest in number. So some attribute this to the fact that they are quite adaptable. You can have insects having a wide range of diet. Some are carnivorous, others are herbivorous. You can have insects that feed on dead organic matter, okay? So this makes them to become easily adaptable to the habitats, to different habitats. And also, let's not forget, they have wings. So these wings allow them to fly to new habitats and colonize them. Okay, so they're quite successful in that. Question number 5. The diagram below represents a longitudinal section of a fruit, okay? Let's take a minute to look at the fruit. So we have the fibrous mesocarp, okay, surrounding the seed. Now, when you talk about the mesocarp is essentially just the part of the fruit wall, okay? For example, if you have a mango, that fleshy, juicy, tasty, and delicious part that we love is what we call the fruit wall, okay? So collectively, it's referred to as the pericarp. The pericarp is composed of 3 layers. The outermost layer that is known as the epicarp or the exocarp, and then we have the middle layer that is the mesocarp, innermost layer, the endocarp. Okay, now this looks to be like a coconut. The mesocarp of coconuts tends to be fibrous and spongy. Reason being that it has these air spaces that it uses to store air. And by doing so, it makes the overall fruit to become light, okay? Remember, coconuts are dependent on water for dispersal. So if they are light, they are buoyant, and they can be dispersed by water from one part to another. We don't want them to be heavy and sink to the bottom, okay? Because if they do so, no dispersal will take place and the fruit will just end up decomposing. So, Roman number 1, identify the mode of dispersal. That, of course, is water. Roman number 2, describe 2 adaptations of the fruit to its mode of dispersal. Number 1, it has a fibrous mesocarp for storage of air to enable it to float, okay, for buoyancy. Number 2 is that it also has a tough seed coat, okay? It has a tough tester, which is impermeable to water. So the tester is waterproof. So that means that it cannot take in water. Remember, if it were to absorb water, it will become heavy and it will sink. We don't want it to sink. We want it to be light and float so that it can be easily dispersed. Question number 6, part A. What causes the following diseases? Roman 1, diabetes mellitus, okay? Diabetes mellitus is caused by insufficient secretion of the insulin, okay? Roman 2, diabetes insipidus. This is caused by insufficient secretion of the antidiuretic hormone. Part B. An individual shows the symptoms for diabetes mellitus. How would you determine in the school lab whether they are positive for the condition? Okay, so what we are actually going to do to determine whether the person has diabetes mellitus or not is simple. We are going to undertake a test for reducing sugars. Remember, if someone is suffering from diabetes mellitus, okay? Remember, diabetes mellitus is what we just, generally refer to as sukari. So if someone is suffering from diabetes, they are going to have glucose present within their urine. So if we were to carry out a test for the reducing sugars and it's a positive test, okay, we can see the variety of colors that we usually see, then that means that that person is suffering from diabetes mellitus. So you're going to take a small sample of urine from the patient, place it in a test tube, add Benedict solution, okay? Now, of course, you're going to go step by step, but yes, and then you're going to heat, okay? We're going to heat until it boils. If we observe the color changes, then that means glucose is present in the urine. That means that the person is, yes, suffering from diabetes mellitus. However, if the blue color of Benedict solution is retained, then yes, that means that the person, glucose is absent, right? And the person is not suffering from diabetes mellitus. Question number 7, part A. Give 2 examples of natural selection in action. Okay, number 1, resistance against insecticides and antibiotics. Number 2, industrial melanism. Now, I want to say this. If you want a deeper discussion over industrial melanism or even resistance against antibiotics, please check out my previous video on evolution. I have discussed these in detail. I am sure by the end of that video, if there are any challenges that you faced with evolution, they will be sorted very quickly. Okay. Part B. List 2 features that make man the most dominant species on Earth. Number 1, ability to communicate through speech. Number 2, the fact that we have an upright posture. Number 3, we have modified our limbs, our forelimbs, into a hand that we can use for grasping, for manipulation of tools, and so many other purposes. Question number 8. Study the diagram below of a neuron in a human being. Okay, take a moment to look at the neuron and identify which type of neuron it is. Remember, we have 3 main categories. We have sensory neurons, motor neurons, and lastly, we also have relay neurons. Okay, now part A, identify the neuron. This is a motor neuron. Reason being that, as you can clearly see, the cell body is located on one end with multiple dendrites extending from it. So actually the part labeled B is a dendrite, okay? That's a receptor dendrite. Question number 9. Study the diagram of the mammalian tooth below and answer the questions that follow. Part A, identify the tooth. Okay, so this is clearly a premolar. Reason being that it has 2 roots, okay? Part C, state one adaptation of the tooth to its function. Okay, so what is the function of the premolar tooth? It's to grind and chew food. Now, when it comes to its adaptation, it has a broad surface with cusps to provide a large surface area for grinding or chewing of food. Question number 10. It was found that during germination of pea seeds, 9.3 cubic centimeters of carbon 4 oxide was produced, while 9.1 cubic centimeters of oxygen was used up. Part A. Calculate the respiratory quotient of the reaction taking place. Now, if we want to calculate the respiratory quotient, we are simply going to, get the volume of carbon 4 oxide produced, place it against the volume of oxygen consumed. So we have been already provided with these values. So 9.3 cubic centimeters over 9.1 cubic centimeters, that will give us an RQ of 1.021. Now, I want to say this. Respiratory quotients are important for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that they let us know whether a reaction is aerobic or anaerobic. Clearly, this is anaerobic respiration, okay? Because oxygen is being used up. Number 2 is that it can be used to determine the type of substrate that is used. So a substrate is simply a food substance that is broken down during respiration in order to obtain energy. It can be a carbohydrate, a lipid, or a protein, although in most cases, our bodies prefer carbohydrates because carbohydrates are mostly soluble in water, therefore they're easier to transport, and because they require less oxygen than, let's say, fats to be oxidized. Now, in this case, when you get an RQ of 1, okay, or a value very close to 1, like in our case, that implies that the substrate is a carbohydrate, okay? So in this case, the carbohydrate was completely broken down, and that is the reason why at the end we end up having almost a ratio of 1:1 when it comes to comparing the volume of oxygen used against the volume of carbon 4 oxide produced. Part B. Explain why it's difficult to measure respiratory quotient in plants. Now, plants have this amazing ability. They can recycle some of their waste products. So, for example, when they carry out photosynthesis during the day, they produce oxygen as a byproduct. Some of this oxygen is actually utilized during respiration. Again, when they carry out respiration, they release carbon 4 oxide as a waste product. Some of this carbon 4 oxide can be repurposed and used during photosynthesis. So it becomes difficult at the end of the day, to find out exactly, the exact volume of oxygen and carbon 4 oxide that was used and produced, okay? Because maybe some of the oxygen was recycled from photosynthesis, or maybe some of the carbon 4 oxide has been used during photosynthesis, so not, the volume that was collected maybe is not all of it. that was produced. Okay. Question number 11. The diagrams below represent two types of bacteria species that cause some human diseases. We have part A and bacterial species B. Identify each bacterium and state the disease it causes. So part A, that is Salmonella typhi, okay, this causes typhoid. Part B, that is Vibrio cholerae, and that causes cholera. Now, just a reminder, when you are writing these scientific names, okay, don't forget the rules of binomial nomenclature. Generic name is always supposed to start with a capital letter. The specific name is supposed to be written in small letters. Lastly, these two names are supposed to be underlined separately because they are handwritten by you. Question number 12a. What is metamorphosis? So these are developmental changes that occur in the bodies of arthropods, okay, over the course of their life cycle, from an egg to an adult form. B. What is the biological significance of metamorphosis to an insect? Now, metamorphosis is very important. Okay, I'm going to give an example. When it comes to metamorphosis, we actually have two main types. We have complete metamorphosis and incomplete metamorphosis. So incomplete metamorphosis, this is where you're going to have the organism passing through 4 stages. We are going to have the egg, larva, pupa, and adult, okay? Very good example is the butterfly, right? Okay. And then in incomplete metamorphosis, this is whereby it passes through 3 stages. A very good example is the cockroach. It's going to be an egg, followed by a nymph, and then lastly an adult. A nymph is simply a younger, immature version of the adult. Okay. So the significance of metamorphosis to an insect, why have an insect pass through these stages, okay? Is it important, and if so, why? Number 1, it enables an organism, okay, to grow in size, okay, and complexity. Number 2, it enables an organism to explore different ecological niche. And by doing so, it reduces competition. For example, when it comes to like the larva or the adult form of a butterfly, they feed on different things, right? The larva might feed on the leaves of certain plants, while when it comes to the adult, they might actually feed on, nectar. So by doing so, it reduces competition because each of them is occupying a different niche. Study and complete the table below. Okay, so we have features, monocots and dicots. Okay, so we're supposed to differentiate monocots from dicots based on the following features. So part A, number of stamens. Okay, now before we do that, let's just discuss this. What is a stamen? A single stamen consists of an anther with its filament. So of course the anthers are attached to the filament. So that single one is what we call a stamen. So monocots can either have stamens in 3s or multiples of 3. So maybe 3, 6, 9, as such. Dicots, on the other hand, will either have them in 4s or multiples of 4. So maybe 4, 8, or it could be 5, 5, 10 as such. Part B, arrangement of vascular bundles in stem. Okay, in monocots, of course, the vascular bundles in the stem are scattered. In dicots, they are arranged in a ring. Okay, part C, the type of root. Monocots have a fibrous root system. Dicots have a taproot system. Question number 14. The diagrams below shows embryos of certain vertebrates animals. Okay, study them and answer the questions that follow. Okay, so we have the embryo of a fish, a tortoise, a chick, and a human. So essentially all these 4 belong to the same phylum, and that is phylum Chordata. This is where the vertebrates are. Part A. Mention 2 observable structural features in these embryos that suggest that they have a common ancestral origin. Okay. Now, All of these, as stated, belong to the same phylum. According to evolution, that means that they share a common ancestor. And because with the embryos looking similar to one another, it also implies that, they have a common ancestry. So if you look at the structures, we can clearly see two, okay? Actually, we can see three. So number one, we have a tail that is present in all of these embryos. Now, in some of these, the tail will be maintained up to adult, like in the fish, but in others, like in humans, it's only present during the early stages of development in, embryonic form. They also have a notochord there. The notochord later on develops to form the backbone. And then we also have the pharyngeal slits, okay? There they are. Now, some, like the fish, maintain the pharyngeal slits. These later on develop to become gills. They disappear in mammals. Part B. What phenomenon in organic evolution is exhibited by these diagrams of embryos? This is comparative embryology, where you find that if you compare the embryos of organisms that share a common ancestry, you're going to end up having certain similarities, right? Yeah. Okay, moving on to question number 15. What is meant by the terms, part A, hypogynous flower? Now, a hypogynous flower is a flower that has a superior ovary, okay? Where you're going to have the floral parts below the ovary. Part B, dichogamy. This is a condition in which male and female floral parts mature at different times, okay? So what will happen is that maybe you're going to find that the stamens mature before the pistil, okay, which is the female part, and therefore they cannot fertilize them and vice versa. So plants have this system in order to, to reduce the chances of self-pollination happening. Cross-pollination is the preferred one because with cross-pollination, you end up having variety and also hybrid vigor. So dichogamy reduces, okay, chances of self-pollination. And that brings us to the end of our lesson today. By the way, in our next lesson, I will be discussing the Maranda High School mock examination paper, but paper 2. So I hope to see you there. Bye.